I have been playing a ton of Yu-Gi-Oh! Genesis, and this has got to be one of my favorite formats of all time. So I play-tested one of my favorite archetypes of all time, that being Counter Fairies. Today I'm going to walk you through the deck profile of the Counter Fairy build that I have personally been playing, and I would love some feedback in the comment section down below. I am more making these videos as a fan, as somebody who loves playing the game, so I am always open to feedback. I'm somebody who has taken a major break from the game, returned. I'm not familiar with a lot of archetypes. This is something I'm very familiar with. So if you guys want to give me some suggestions down in the comments, I'm always open for it. I'm a fan of the game. I'm not here giving you guys an insane tutorial, but this deck build does work. So that's important to note, okay? Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy between a YouTube channel. So before I walk you through everything that I'm using over here, I wanted to talk about how this deck has functioned so far. The problem being, the biggest problem that I have with Genesis format right now is that there are all of these deck archetypes that I'm personally not familiar for, because again, I'm an old player returning to this game. I quit around the hat format, or like after the hat format moved on to whatever format was after that. There's a lot of cards that I'm struggling knowing, like, okay, maybe this is the one I should be negating. Other than that, the deck structure, it works well. I like the traps that I've chosen. There's a couple things that I might want to mix in here and there and playtest a little bit more. I struggle a little bit with a lot of archetypes when going second. But again, the deck works, and I think my biggest problem with this entire thing is that I'm not familiar with some of the decks that I'm playing against. But let's walk you through exactly what I'm doing here over here, okay? Starting off with, we have the two, the Archetype Parshath cards and the Sky Paladin. These two are going to be the primary targets for Rebirth of Parshath, and I think that's an excellent card. That's something we're going to talk a little bit more about. I typically go for the Sacred Arc, but Neo, the Neo card is the one that I go for afterwards, so typically in that order, and then if these are both being used, then I go for the Synchro Monster that we're going to talk a little bit about. But I love both of these cards. They're both nice beat sticks. You're to recycle your counter trap cards, you get to draw, you get a little bit of attack point boost with the Sky Paladin. Both of these cards are very good, very underrated in my opinion. Let's continue on over to two cards, and these are probably the only two cards in the deck that I'm thinking about cycling out. Something that we're going to be talking about is Ties of Brethren, and sometimes you need a Power Angel because it's just the way that you've been drawing cards. But it's definitely not a useless card. It's just not one that I feel like, has aged all that too well. This is a card that I've run in the Counter Fairy deck for a very long time. Thunder King Ryo is an interesting one. And I've been playtesting, cycling in and out the Barrier Statue of Light, or whatever the exact monster is called. I believe it's the Barrier Statue of Light, the 4-star. It's the Barrier Statue card. You all know what I'm talking about, probably. The one where you can't special summon any monsters besides light monsters. I originally had that card in the build, but it took up so many points that I started cycling it out, and I was like, okay, maybe something that can replace it a little bit. I like Thunder King. I think it's a great monster. You stop people from adding cards from the deck to the hand, something that you don't really do in this deck. I think so far it's been proven to be beneficial to have this card, but I think I might do a little bit of point adjustments so I have the Barrier Statue. And I forgot to mention, I should have mentioned at the beginning of the video, the point total is about 97. So Thunder King Ryo, it's about 20 points, I believe it is. It takes up the points, and I think it's a card that I like having in the deck as well. Okay, let's continue on over to, of course, 3 copies of Minerva and 3 copies of Bountiful Artemis. We're going to be talking about a Sanctuary of the Sky card. We don't use the field spell in this build. I've always thought that card was kind of useless. I always like the alternative to it. This card, along with the continuous spell that we're going to be talking about, is phenomenal. And of course, Bountiful Artemis, draw power. These are staples in the Counter Fairy deck. And I know most people run 3 copies of the Bountiful card, but I like 3 copies of this as well. Let's continue on over to the next card. We also have Meltiel, Sage of the Sky. This I'd be comfortable with running in 2, but we already kind of have a low amount of monsters in the deck. I like 3 copies of this. Plus, again, if you have Sanctuary of the Sky in the field, you also get to pop a card. I like getting life points. I'm a big fan of the Solemn cards. I'm constantly paying life points. It's always helpful. So we have 3 copies of kind of the main Counter Fairies. Now, get this. This is what I am excited to put in the deck over here, and it was suggested to me. I wasn't familiar with either of these cards, but when I was talking with somebody who was familiar with the modern format, these 2 cards were suggested to me. Never heard of them before. Oh my god. This is like just as good as having the Pendulum cards. We have Time Tearing Morganite and then the Guilt Gripping one. Insane. So the first one, for the rest of the duel, apply the following effects. You cannot activate monsters and effects in the hand. We don't do that. Draw 2 cards instead of 1 for your normal draw phase. You can conduct 2 normal summons and sets per turn, not just 1. And you can banish a card from the graveyard, discard 1, which of the same card, which it happens. And your opponent can activate monster effects when you normal summon. Phenomenal card! I've never heard of these cards and they cost no points. What? So there's no downsides to using it. And then for the guilt gripping one, you cannot activate monster effects in the hand. You can normal summon level 5 or higher monsters without tributing. Those fairies at the beginning that we were talking about, the Parshath cards, you do not pay life points to activate spells and trap cards. Are you kidding? Solemn Judgment, Solemn Strike, Solemn Warning, give me all of them. Then you can banish it, and you get to just draw a card pretty well. Incredible cards. I've never heard of these 2 things before, and it was suggested to me. Again, the only reason I know about them is because it was suggested to me. These are definitely staples. I tried playing with 2 copies of each. I like having 3 copies of each because the sooner you get these things, the better. And they end up being useful in the graveyard with the discard effect if you end up having multiple copies of it. Very, very, very strong cards. Let's continue on to, of course, 3 copies of Ties of Brethren. I love this card in Counter Fairies. You summon one of them. They're all 4-star. They're all light. They're all fairy. Get more cards out. This is where I was thinking that I would like to have the Barrier Statue card too, in place of Thunder King Ryo. But again, we'd have to play around with some of the other cards with points. I like having all the Solemn cards. There's a monster in the extra deck, I believe, that takes up points too. But this is a phenomenal card for Counter Fairies. 3 copies, 100%. You get your board out. You get your counter traps ready. This helps build the field, no problem. And of course, never in a million years would I thought I'd be making a deck profile that consists of Pot of Greed, but we have 1 copy of Pot of Greed and 1 Pot of Extravagance. We don't rely on the extra deck in this deck type, excuse me. Yeah, we synchro and XYZ every once in a while, but most of the time that's not going to happen, so I don't mind having Pot of Extravagance at all. Banish the 6 cards, whatever. If it ends up being one of my Parshath cards, who cares? Pot of Greed, draw 2 cards. You would also have to get rid of this thing if you were to add Barrier Statue back to the deck, but I don't mind that. We just had the points to spare, and why not get a +1 for free? Crazy that we're running Pot of Greed, and we also have Pot of Duality. You don't do a ton of special summoning, like it's not necessary, so this card's also good too. But this is one card that I wouldn't mind swapping out for something. Maybe another copy Pot of Extravagance, but I don't recall Pot of Extravagance that costs anything at the top of my head. Excuse me, what was wrong with me? Let's continue on to the Sanctum of Parshath. This is something that I'm probably going to end up changing, running 3 copies of. Initially, I ran 3 copies. I reduced it to 2, but I think I liked it better when I was playing 3. For now, the deck that I'm playtesting currently, and of course, we'll probably update this as time goes on. I'm probably always going to be making changes to the deck, new versions of Counter Fairies, things like that. I like this at 3 copies more than I do 2, but for this build right now, I'm running it at 2 copies. You get a little bit of a boost, and the biggest, most important thing about it is the name becomes the Sanctuary of the Sky. Of course, you get the Minerva effect, you get the Maltiel or whatever his name is, the effect, you gain 1,000 life points, pop a card. Sanctuary of the Sky is a big benefit for your monsters, and you get to recycle your trap cards with Minerva. Very, very, very good card, okay? And I rarely use that secondary effect for it. Now hear me out. I won't hear you out, to be fair, because my mind's made up and I'm never cycling these cards out. I pretty well have these in every single deck build ever, okay? Dark Sanctuary and Moon Mirror Shield. Typically, I have 3 copies of Dark Sanctuary, but so far I've been satisfied with 2. Moon Mirror Shield, one of my favorite cards of all time. You attach to any monster, you can't beat it, and sometimes those monsters you just can't get over, and all of a sudden, you got more attack points. Dark Sanctuary is a card that I run in pretty well every single deck that doesn't rely on a field spell, and it's the reason why I like the continuous spell as opposed to the Sanctuary in the Sky, which is kind of a useless card in my opinion. Plus, you don't need to get terraforming, you don't need to get the monster that searches it out. I prefer having this. You just coin toss, negate an attack on an opponent's monster, and then you do damage to them. Half the time, you wouldn't believe how much this frustrates people, and you wouldn't believe how much it's actually helpful. Oh, yeah, your attack's negated, I guess. Happens for every attack ever. 2 of the most underrated cards in Yu-Gi-Oh! History. I will never not run these things, okay? Let's continue on to the next cards over here. Onto the continuous traps. We have Drastic Drop-Off and Negate Attack. I like Drastic Drop-Off a lot. First of all, of course, if your opponent's searching for a very particular card, and this has been the problem that I've been having with getting back into the game, is there's archetypes where I'm not familiar with how important the monster is to get to their hands, so I've been, not sure exactly when to use this. But when you have effects that you know, when you do this with a counter trap card, or when you know, like those effects where it's like when you activate a counter trap, this thing happens. You can kind of activate this whenever you want. So I like having one of these options in the drastic drop off. I think it can't hurt to be in the deck. Negate attack as well. Sometimes it's just good to end the battle phase. I think it's a good counter trap. Let's continue on to the next counter traps over here. We have 2 copies of Solemn Strike, 1 copy of Solemn Warning. Like I said, big fan of the Solemn cards, especially now that we have cards where you do not have to pay life points. Phenomenal, incredible. And then 3 copies of Solemn Judgment. This is my favorite Solemn card. Whenever I can run 3 of these bad boys, I typically do. One of my favorite counter traps, one of my favorite trap cards in general of all time. Now, this Force Back we'll talk about first, and excuse me, I couldn't find a different photo for it. Force Back, I don't think works as well as it used to. Negate the normal summon, flip summon of a monster, return to the owner's hand. I used to run this card a lot in Counter Fairies. I actually, in some builds, I've run 3 copies of Force Back. But so far in my playtesting, I think I'd rather just cycle it out for something else. Maybe another Solemn Warning, but Solemn Warning also costs points, so I'd have to play around with what counter trap I would like. But I'm not so sold on Force Back anymore. But, I mean, it's still a useful card. I'm not saying it's useless. I obviously kept it in the deck through the playtest, but I actually when I started playing the Counter Fairies, I think I had 2 of these, reduced it to 1. 3 copies, in my opinion, non-negotiable. Rebirth of Parshat. You shuffle a card in the deck. A lot of times you don't even need to pay 1,000 life points with your time-tearing cards and your Sage of the Sky card. You get to special summon 1 Parshath monster from your deck or your extra deck. You can get the Synchro, or you can get the 2 big bosses at the beginning. Once you start getting those monsters going is when this deck really, really helps. Plus, you can negate any effect. Spell, trap, monster effect. The vast majority of times you're going to have a counter trap in your hand. Don't care that I need to discard. This card is phenomenal. 3 copies, 100%. Let's continue on to the next 2. Dark Bribe and Debunk. I have always been a fan of Dark Bribe. I have always thought it was underrated. Don't care that my opponent draws a card. I want to negate the spell and trap. Debunk is also a great card from effects in the hand, and I didn't realize how much more useful this has become over time. Perhaps this would be okay at 2. There's a lot of effects that activate from a hand now. I know that hand traps are a thing, but and it's been reduced a little bit, and I can't imagine running this in the modern format, let alone just Genesis, because that's when these things have taken a hit. But I've only found Debunk to be more useful as time has gone on, so this one I might actually end up having having another copy of it in the deck. Maybe that's something I could circle out Force Back for. I do have a lot of summon negations already. It's a toughie, but I think these 2 are excellent cards. I really like having them in the deck. Let's continue on over to the extra deck over here. The extra deck isn't something that I use very much. I am typically, if I'm going to get something out, it's going to be number 101. Gaga Cowboy I love because you get the, sometimes that burn damage just does game. Fairy Churro Girl has been a little bit useful. Tornado Dragon could always be useful. Time Thief Redoer is okay, but of course we are mostly going to be using the Parshath Synchro monster. That has a good effect too. But the extra deck is kind of like there if you need that extra option. Usually I just work with the monsters that I work with. But if you guys want to talk about another deck build, unfortunately, I currently do not have another Genesis deck build for you. But stay tuned because we are going to be doing probably Skull Servants next. That's what I've been playtesting. So for now, why don't you check out a Edison deck profile over here? I would love to have you over there. Thank you very, very much for watching, everybody. Take care, guys.